Good morning.
Good morning.
I think we'll go ahead and get started. Are you all able to hear me in the back? I was hoping to stand down here and walk around a bit so it doesn't feel quite so much like a lecture, and it also gives me a chance to address your questions a little better. Good morning and welcome. I'm planning on chatting for 25 minutes or so with you this morning, and then making sure I leave plenty of time for questions, because I know I won't cover all the things that are of interest to you. Thank you so much. I'm really pleased with the huge turnout here this morning. I walked across campus this morning and I thought it felt more like an autumn day than it did the middle of summer, and so starting to get in the mood for all the students to return here in a few weeks. The campus is going to look a lot different in August. So first of all, thank you for those of you who work all summer. I've always worked all summer, and I know most of you have as well, and I just want to say how appreciative I am of those of you who really are here 365 days a year making the University of Louisville work and making everything here so wonderful. So the plan, I've asked for these forums, and John Dries and his team, they've just been wonderful as always, helping me set these up. We have one today, and then there's one tomorrow on the Health Sciences campus, but we're going to repeat these in the fall. So we're looking for dates right now, either late September or early October. It won't be the same presentation, but it'll be a continuation of what we talk about today, and I want to try and keep the campus dialogue really active, because as you'll see from what I'm going to show today, I need all of your help and advice about next steps ahead, and the only way to do that is for us to be in very frequent conversation. So what I want to talk about today is the transition of activities as I see them on campus here over the next 6 months. So we're about ready to welcome a new class of students, and we've started the 2017-2018 academic year, and that isn't just symbolic, it's real. We have a real transition that we have to make, and today I want to make some remarks that I hope encourage all of you to join me in this effort to start switching gears and thinking about different things at the University of Louisville. So I'll explain what I mean. You see this diagram up here. On the left of the diagram is where we have been living. So from January to June of this year, we have been spending the vast majority of our time making sure that we really diligently approach problems that all of you are aware of. They're the things that we have been talking about in these forums. They're the things that you read about online. They're the things that are discussed at our Board of Trustees meetings. And they've been incredibly important. We've had real problems to tackle. And thankfully, at this point, we have wonderful teams of people engaged with me, focused on every single one of these things. And we can talk about them today, and there'll be questions, I'm sure, at the end about various topics, but things like the NCAA and the SACS accreditation and the budget, and all these are things that are very real, and they're things that we're working through, but they're not the future. They are the ways that we are approaching and resolving problems that we have had to face in order to get past them and move our organization forward. What I want to do today is try to spend some time starting to shift the emphasis away from solving problems of the past and looking at what can we be. What can the University of Louisville be? What can we become? What can it be that all of you can get excited about? It's hard to come to work day after day after day enthusiastic about solving problems that happened 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. They have to be resolved. I'm not making light of them, and they will be. They're in the process of being resolved. But that's not what drives people. That's not what makes you come to campus every day and get excited about your work, because it's not future directed, it's historically directed. So that's the emphasis today. And I want to tell a little bit about what's going on at University Hospital, because I think you'll understand the symbolism here and the model it represents. These are things that are starting to appear on some documents at the hospital, and things that I'm starting to hear people talk about on both campuses, actually. But it's the power of you, and obviously the symbolism here is not just the University of Louisville, but you. I mean, all of us. Because after all, this is our hospital in the case of U of L Hospital, and more broadly, this is our university. I think one of the main reasons people choose an academic career is because they know that it's the kind of place where everyone has a say in what goes on. The staff, the faculty, there are organizations that represent these bodies of employees and bring their ideas forward so that those can be shared and incorporated into decision making. And that's unique. The corporate world is not like that in most places. In most places, the corporate world is more of a top-down structure where employees come to work and they're sort of told what to do. Universities are not supposed to be like that. Universities are supposed to be places where thought leaders come together, share their ideas, and as a result, enable the administration to make better decisions. So really, it is our university. And we have to start thinking that way, because at that point then we become part of the solution, and that's empowering. So the story at University of Louisville Hospital, I'll just take a minute on this. If you go back a year in time, for those of you who work at the hospital, you'll understand this. People were down. They were very demoralized. Things were not going the way they wanted them to. There was very much a top-down culture. The hospital was being managed by a big national corporation, and people came to work and they were told what to do. And they didn't like the way things were going, and many of them voted with their feet. People were leaving. We had trouble keeping nurses. We had agency nurses in critical positions. We had faculty physicians leaving. We had staff leaving. And there was this feeling that things just weren't going to get better. And then in December, we took matters into our own hands, and we decided to take steps to bring the hospital back under the management of University Medical Center, UMC, and away from the corporate management of Kentucky One Health. So during the period January through June, what happened was absolutely amazing. Literally hundreds of faculty and staff became engaged in day-by-day activities of bringing about this transition and helping redesign a hospital that they themselves were going to manage. And it started slow. You know, January and February, people were a little skeptical and they weren't really sure if it was going to work. But starting in the spring, March, April, May, all of a sudden, you started to see larger groups meeting, people meeting more frequently, people who hadn't been engaged before starting to come around and really participate actively in this. And by June, it was palpable that on the 1st of July, the UMC was going to take this hospital over. And on Saturday, July 1st, it was almost like a pep rally down there. The enthusiasm was amazing as people realized, well, now we have no one to blame if things don't go right. We are in control, and by God, we're going to do it right. And so it's really exciting to see this. And the reason I tell the story and spend a few minutes of your morning sort of reliving this is that's what happens when the whole group gets involved, when you have a grassroots effort to do something and bring about change as opposed to a top-down approach. Top-down approaches don't work. So I tell this story because we need an analogy like that on the Belknap campus, and this morning I'm going to go through and talk about what some of those burning platforms could be. Now, people talk about strategic planning, and it's critically important, but what's even more important than putting the plan together is actually following it. Okay, so if we think back, let's go through history now back to 2008. Hundreds of hours of faculty and staff time went into the creation of the 2020 plan. And that plan was released, and these are the 5 pillars or main themes within the 2020 plan. So if we think about them, educational excellence, research, scholarship, creative activity, diversity, community engagement, and stewardship. That's who we are. It's hard to imagine improving on those kinds of overarching goals. Now, obviously, there are many, many ways that those goals could be approached and lots of different strategies that could be used to bring those about, but those are the themes. Now, at some point, the university community may decide to do a new strategic plan, and that's up to all of you, and if that's the case, that's fine. But in the meantime, we have one. And the pillars, I think most of you would agree, represent very clearly what it is that's important to people who work at a university. Now, 4 years later, in 2012, once again, hundreds of hours of faculty and staff time went into the creation of the 21st Century Initiative. Now, this was not meant to throw the 2020 plan out. and start over. This was meant to reinforce the 2020 plan and come up with some specific ideas as to how the goals could be implemented. So this is a roadmap, a little more of a granular approach to the ideas that were originally written in the 2020 plan. So here we have 2 points in time where a huge shared governance process at the university on both campuses engaged and wrote this document, and then the amplification of it 4 years later. And right now, this is our strategic plan. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it this morning and how there are so many things within it that really can be empowering to us if we choose to engage. So let's kind of go through each of the 5 and spend a few minutes on each. So educational excellence is the first one, appropriately so. It's a university, it's a place where students are taught, and there were achievements, no doubt about it, in the 2020 plan. If we go back and look at the last 8 or 9 years and what has happened, we've been bringing in students with better scores coming out of high school. We have improved our student-teacher ratio across the board. It's down to 16-to-1, which is a lot better than it used to be. We have successfully integrated critical thinking into the undergraduate curriculum, which of course is a predictor of success in almost any career. There's been a modest increase in PhD production. And then of course the campus experience and the life for students is dramatically different. The main library on Belknap campus has been renovated and repurposed. The Swain Center is being expanded and renovated. There's a brand new building going up, the Belknap Academic Building, which will house some of the most innovative teaching for our undergraduate students. Campus housing has proliferated, as have living and learning communities, which we know are linked with student success. So these are all things that we can point to and be proud of as collective accomplishments. But those of us who work here know that a lot of things that were discussed in the 2020 plan and the 21st Century Initiative did not come to pass. So the number of undergraduate degree programs that we offer is more or less static over the last 10 years. Enrollment growth has not changed much. We still have roughly the same number of students that we did. And much remains to be done to improve our graduation rates. That's one of the things I worry about more than anything. Only a little over half of our students graduate, and that's giving them 6 years. If we look at the 4-year graduation rate, it's between 25 and 27%. So you can imagine that this room we're in today is where we host the orientation week activities, where the students and their parents come and they spend a couple of days getting to know the campus, and we break it up into groups so that they fit in this room, and we do it about 10 times during the fall of the year. And so this room will be full of new high school graduates, and I look around on the days when those activities take place and realize that half the people in the room will leave without a degree. And it's sickening. People are coming here with great hopes and aspirations. It's expensive to go to college. And what could be worse than leaving with debt and no degree? My God. And so we just can't sit still and accept that. So to me, that is the one that really stands out on this list of 3 of something that really needs to be addressed very aggressively. Now, what could be? Okay, so what could we do as a university if we chose to? And these ideas are nothing more than that. They're ideas that we need to find out how much engagement from the staff and their faculty is to turn these into burning platforms. And they're not mutually exclusive. Would it make sense for us to be a larger university? If we look around us, the University of Kentucky, the University of Cincinnati, those are schools with more than 30,000 students. We're between 22 and 23,000. Would it make sense for us to be larger? What would be the advantages? What would be the disadvantages? We should, as we just talked about, find ways to increase graduation rates. How should we do that? We need creative thinking. We need everyone engaged if we're going to make that happen. Does it make sense to revisit the concept of a Phi Beta Kappa chapter on campus? It's a heavy lift, but boy, it would have a lot of benefits. It would be expensive, but it wouldn't just be the designation of being Phi Beta Kappa. It's all the stuff that comes along with it. What does it mean to have a Phi Beta Kappa chapter, right? That's quite a distinction. I'm a proud member of Phi Beta Kappa myself, and I would be thrilled to be part of an initiative that would help bring that here. We talk about distance education, right? It's incredibly important in our society today. We certainly offer it, and I think it's of high quality, but a lot of faculty have concerns about how it's structured and what it means to departments, and it really needs to be looked at if we're going to consider doing it in a bigger way, because it could be wonderful. Look what Arizona State University is doing. I'm not advocating for perhaps something that extreme, but they've brought 100,000 students into the fold, largely through distance education development, and you can't turn the radio on without hearing an Arizona State University advertisement here in Louisville. So just an example of how a really concentrated approach to something like that can have far-reaching impacts. So these are things, if the faculty and staff desire, could be transformative for the University of Louisville. They're all consistent with things that are in our current strategic plan, so this isn't a deviation from prior thinking, but it certainly would be a change in direction. It would be a change of focus, and it would require the creation of and the allocation of resources appropriately to make these things possible. So I'm going to do this for each of the 5. So for research, scholarship, and creative activity, again, there have been accomplishments in this area, to be sure. Now, again, the starting point here is 2008, when the 2020 plan was written. So the increase in research at the University of Louisville actually was quite pronounced leading up to that. So in the 07-08 period, when Bucks for Brains, in the late 90s, early 2000s, when Bucks for Brains was kicking in, we saw our research triple. So we went from 50 million to 140 million during that decade. But then starting in 08 and going forward to the present, the growth has been more modest. So we've gone from 140 to 185 in total research expenditures. That's an increase, that's good. The goal, though, was somewhere between 400 and 500 million. So it just gives you an idea that the goal was not attained, even though there was growth. The year we just ended was the biggest year ever for extramural funding and for total research expenditures when we hit 185. Similarly, clinical trial activity. The year that just ended was the biggest year ever for clinical trials at U of L, and it has grown, but it's grown at a modest pace. We have the one area where we did surpass the goal in the 2020 plan was in peer-reviewed publications. So we topped 2,000, and the goal was somewhere around 1,500. So there was a real achievement there in creative writing and in peer-reviewed publications. There has been an increase in patent awards and license-related income, and of course we've seen continued areas of development and research sort of in niche areas where the university is very well known. So there's been continued progress in those areas that we all know so well. Now, what was not accomplished? So we already alluded to this. While the research enterprise has grown, the growth has been modest compared to what had been hoped for. The second one is what really worries me. When we had the Bucks for Brains initiative and we brought a lot of researchers to campus, which of course was a big and expensive initiative, some of those wonderful people are still here. And some have retired and moved on, but we have not been filling the pipeline. Okay, so we have senior people who are doing great things, but what are we going to do when they retire? There hasn't been much thought given to what's next, and this is a real problem as we look at the trajectory going forward. The goal of National Cancer Institute accreditation for the Cancer Center was abandoned. I have no idea why, but it was, and that's a problem. But that was one of the things that was assumed in the 2020 plan to be part of the driver for growth in research. Similarly, there was a failed application for a Clinical Translation Science Award. We need to go back and think about it. Does it make sense for these various NCI and NIH pathways to be revisited as part of our strategic agenda? And the growth of graduate students, it's occurred, but it's been slow, and it's been in certain areas as opposed to across the board. Again, something to think about. So what could be? Well, we've never built a scalable infrastructure here for research. One of my criticisms of the 2020 plan was that there were a lot of great ideas in there, but they didn't really think through all the resources that were going to be needed to make those things successful. They didn't think about how our IT platforms needed to be enhanced and modernized. Literally everything we do, every type of research infrastructure necessary to support this type of enterprise was not methodically put in place. And so I guess it's not a surprise that the rate of growth was as modest as it was. There was no valid business plan for supporting research. Research requires subsidy. And when we go out and we try to attract teams of researchers, naturally they have requests and they need startup funds and they've got folks they want to bring with them. How do you pay for that? It can't be paid for off the backs of other faculty or off of tuition increases. That's not fair. It has to be paid for in another way, through donors, through industry relationships, other kinds of mechanisms. And not a lot of thought was given to that. So again, it's not surprising that the growth was constrained. And then I mentioned this briefly, universities that are mature in research have mature industry academic partnerships. And we're starting to do that here, but it's in its infancy. And that's something that could be considered. So again, these are things that I need your help. As a campus, we have to decide, which of these makes sense, which fits in the context of the University of Louisville, and could these things be helpful in getting us from where we are to where we want to be. Diversity, opportunity, and social justice. Okay, so here are some things that have been accomplished. Now, whether these are good news or bad news is somewhat subjective. It's good news that the numbers have all increased, no question about that. The subjective part is, have they increased enough? And the answer is probably not. So if you look at the number of African American students and Hispanic and Latino students, this is from 2009 through 2015. That's the period under consideration. Every single one of these has increased. Graduate enrollment, number of faculty members, so the first 6 bullet points on this slide all represent upticks in diverse representation of our student body, our graduate enrollment, and our faculty. Personally, I don't think they're sufficient. It's moving in the right direction, but it could move faster. And so this is just, I think, important for us to step back and say, okay, what really happened between 2009 and 2015? Similarly, we've had more students studying abroad, but as we'll point out in a moment, not enough students from international locations coming to the university itself. And a lot of work has been done in athletics, achieving equity in women's sports. So these are a few things that we can point to where there at least has been progress, and we can debate the pace of the progress. Now, what was not achieved? Well, this first one is sad. So while there are more students representing diverse populations enrolled at the university, there's still a persistent achievement gap in terms of the graduation rates and the retention of students once they matriculate into the university. So that's a serious problem. There's a lack of administrators of African American or Hispanic Latino background. There has not been a concentrated effort to increase the population of international students across the whole university. And there are significant needs in analyzing and improving our campus climate as it pertains to diversity. The event that happened the end of last week is a perfect example. What a nightmare, to come to work and find something hanging from a tree on campus. It's just appalling to me that in this modern day and age at a university something like that could happen. It's hard to imagine. But it goes beyond that. The last time a campus climate survey was done at U of L was a few years back, and I've never seen it. My understanding is that the results were not good, and therefore it wasn't published. Well, there's your answer. That tells you everything you need to know about the campus climate. It's broken, right? So what are we doing? Well, we're repeating it, okay? So we're doing a campus climate survey, and this time we're going to publish it no matter what it says, because we need to know. And if there are problems, how else do you fix things? But just putting them right out there and saying, okay, these 5 things are working and these 3 things are broken, and we're going to set about fixing them, right? So that just some of this is pretty basic, but it hasn't been done, and it's time. So we're going to do that. Now, what could be? So here you go, an aggressive cultural assessment. I guess I already I feel guilty. I've started that one already, and this is supposed to be the list that you tell me what I'm supposed to do, but I assume that most people would think that's a good idea. But what do we need to do? How do we renew our efforts at the creation of scholarships to encourage a more diverse climate and population of students and faculty at U of L? What do we do to enhance pipeline programs? Clearly a very important component of any diversity initiative. And then how do we go about recruiting? What do our search committees look like? What do we tell search firms? How are search committees charged? What are they asked to do? What kind of qualities and characteristics are being sought in a person who is applying for a job? All of that is part of this discussion, and these are things, again, you know, if the faculty and students feel that these are appropriate things to do, could be rallying points, things for us to really become enthused about as part of our campus agenda. Continuing on, community engagement. This one we've had a lot of success if you look at the 2020 plan. So there has been a tremendous success. If you look at the signature partnerships, which is really sort of the prototype for us for community engagement, trying to revitalize and bring energy to West Louisville. This has been extremely successful. Look at some of these numbers. 21,000 instances of student engagement over this period of time, 4,200 instances of faculty and staff engagement, 250,000 hours of service, more than 200 partner organizations in the community. And this last one, Carnegie classification, there are only 360 universities in the whole United States who have Carnegie classification for community engagement. We've been lucky. We've been able to do it twice. It started, I think, in 06, Ralph, is that right? That was the first one. So we got it in 08, and then we reclassified again in 2015. So this puts us in a select group of universities that have chosen this voluntary recognition. Of course, not everything is achieved. So some of you probably don't even remember the City Solution Center. It was a great idea. It started in 2008, right when the 2020 plan came out. And the idea was that we were going to partner with the Kentucky League of Cities, and we were going to go out and try to help other communities do things to promote economic development and attainment of educational goals and all the things that community engagement from a university can mean. And it got started, but it fizzled in 2011 because of lack of resources. Great idea. It wasn't funded, so it didn't come to pass. It's still a good idea. And then community engagement. There are areas of campus where this is part of the fiber and part of what people think about every day, and there are other parts where it isn't. So it's inconsistently evident as you look throughout the campus environment. So what are some things that could happen? Well, community engagement for us has worked. So this can be an engine where the university can help drive economic development, can advocate for health care and augmentation of educational attainment in communities in greater Louisville and beyond. This is what universities are supposed to do. They're supposed to be strong, viable community partners. Something we could really be proud about because we're making a difference. We're transforming the lives of people. Community engagement can serve as an engine for interdisciplinary education and research. So think about this. This is touching on everything we do, education, research, healthcare, using that expertise that's generated here to expand beyond and make a difference in the community. We have a really exciting project underway at 18th and Broadway where we're building a large facility in conjunction with our partners at Passport Health. And there will be 1,000 people working on this property, all kinds of opportunities for U of L presence there, healthcare services, all sorts of things. We're in the process of talking to the residents of the community right now to understand what it is that's important to them, so we make sure that we put things there that are relevant and are going to make a difference. And then the last one, creative and responsible stewardship of resources. So what was accomplished? Well, during the period 2008 to 2015, the university underwent a development campaign, and $1 billion was raised over that period of time. The money, some of it was cash, some of them were endowments, some of them were pledges, some of them were estate gifts, Some of them were dollars in support of the programmatic missions of the university. So a whole host of different things that those dollars went to support. The amount of financial aid that we were able to offer our students across campus increased during that same period of time. And we modernized and energized our Alumni Association, which today is an enviable organization. They do a fantastic job and do a great job of representing the university and helping us harvest the talents of our alumni. Now, what was not achieved? Well, the first one is true in spades, right? So you'll laugh. The endowment goal set out in the 2020 plan was for there to be $3 billion in the endowment. I guess that didn't work. So that was not achieved. And as a byproduct of that, we were not able to put together a sustainable model to fund our advancement office. We need to think about that. It costs money to raise money. We have to have talented development officers and people who work with donor relations and stewardship in order to make sure that this thing just hums like it should, and that takes a sustainable business model. A culture of philanthropy. There are pockets around the university where it's really strong, but again, it's not consistent across both campuses. Donor stewardship is really inconsistent. We have families and individuals who have given large amounts of money to the university and then have been promptly forgotten. They don't receive reports about what the money is being used for. Nobody calls them. Nobody says thank you. Inexcusable. I mean, you know, if I give money to someone, I want to know what it's for, and I would like to hear a report about how it's being used, and I think that's just a natural expectation of a donor. And there's been, again, this top-down approach to priority setting. Top-down doesn't work. It's got to be a grassroots. What is it that the faculty and staff are excited about that they in turn can go out and get donors excited about, right? It has to come from the people who are doing the work, not from someone sitting in an office deciding what the priorities are. So what could be? Well, we could do a new donor campaign here. That's something people could get excited about. Put it together in a really well-organized fashion and go about it the right way and understand what the money's going to be used for and make sure that it targets things that are deficiencies here and things that we really need to support. Take care of our donors, a new approach to stewardship. You know, treat the donors like they deserve to be treated. And then in the process, it's going to take everybody at the University of Louisville's collective effort to make sure the community knows what a wonderful place this is. You know, if you read the Courier-Journal, you do not come away with an understanding of what the University of Louisville is all about. You see a slice of stories that I guess the media finds interesting, that are reported on over and over and over again, and the stuff that we're talking about here today does not find its way into the newspaper. Now, we're working hard with the media to try to change that. So we've been going out and we've been meeting with station managers and others who control what gets into the media, and it's been exciting to see that there's some receptivity. Even the media are getting tired of some of the stories they're running and are looking for other things to talk about. Well, we've got plenty of things to give them, so we're making sure that those relationships are being developed. So that's the future. Before I have this slide about the budget, I'll come back to it in a second. I want to just pause there for a second and make sure you understand that the bulk of this presentation today is designed to just test campus receptivity to this concept of sort of shifting gears. Can we start to think about the future? Can we find things and work on things as a group that people feel are valuable and worthwhile and solving the problems we have? Because that's the way you don't ever find yourself in a situation like we're in currently again, right? I mean, we can wallow in self-pity and say, oh my goodness, what happened to us? This is terrible. Or we can say, all right, this is what was not done. This is what we need to do, because after all, it's our university. If we don't fix it, who's going to? You know, somebody's not going to come in and fix this university. It doesn't matter who it is. A president's not going to do it. A board of trustees is not going to do it. This takes the faculty and the staff to fix it. And what I'm trying to do is be the sounding board, throw out ideas. You can throw darts at them, or you can take them and say, these are absolutely wonderful ideas. We need that kind of input in order to get past the junction where we are. So that's really what I wanted to introduce today. Now, that said, I know you all came here with questions, and I'm about ready to take them. But before I do, I wanted to just say a couple of things about the budget, because that's certainly a hot topic on campus. I think you all know we've got a balanced budget in place, which is a really unique thing at the University of Louisville. This is a new concept here. It's a little painful, but it's a new concept, and we were honest to our students. So we kept our promise and we kept the tuition flat. So that was the real trick, is balancing the budget and not raising the tuition, because the other universities in the state didn't do that. They had expenses as well, but they had the students pay for it, and we didn't. The budget has conservative assumptions in it. For instance, we've assumed that we're not going to raise any money this year. Do you think that's true? Of course that's not true. We're going to raise money this year. We're going to raise a lot of money. Is it going to be as much as we did 3 or 4 years ago? Maybe, maybe not. But it's not going to be zero. Okay? But so those are the kinds of assumptions that we've put in here. We've baked very conservative assumptions in. Believe it or not, we are following our budget and looking on a month-to-month basis to see how we're doing. That's new too. Isn't it amazing? We never did that before. They would put the budget on a shelf and they'd come back a year later and see how it looked. Well, we can't do that, okay? We are doing this constantly, okay? So Susan and her team are probably driving you all crazy and working with the deans and the lead financial officers, but that's what you have to do in order to monitor whether a budget is working or not. All parts of the university are making sacrifices. I don't want anybody to think that anyone is spared the pain of what we're going through. That includes athletics, that includes the health sciences campus, that includes the Belknap campus, and if you want examples, we'll show them to you. There are lots of them. Everybody is making sacrifices. There are no groups being protected in the process that we're going through. Now, look at this next one. I probably should have put it in red ink so it would stand out more. So I've been going around campus and meeting with groups in all different kinds of settings like this and others. And the last month I have been hearing that the idea of taxing procurement at 6% was a lousy idea. I wish I had a nickel for every person who has told me that, because if I did, I'd probably have the $48 million and our problem would be over. So I have heard that over and over and over and over again. And so I've been meeting with Lee Smith, who's just doing an incredible job of helping us look at our operations and our procurement and these kinds of things, because we have to save money in these areas. We're spending too much money. And so I've said to Lee in the last couple of days, we're going to do this another way. And you notice the nervous smile on his face, because he's a guy who says he's going to do something, by God, he's going to do it. And so if I say we're going to do it a different way, that means we have to figure something out. Well, I think we have made a lot of progress in the last couple of weeks thinking through other ways that we can save on procurement without the 6% tax. If we look at just the results, for instance, from the month of July, which is almost over, believe it or not, our ProCard transactions are down almost $450,000 from last year, and the number of ProCard purchases is down 10%. That's an amazing start. We're 3 weeks in to this new budget year, and we're just getting people used to this kind of thinking, and there has already been that kind of collective effort to retain expenses. If we keep doing that, we don't need a 6% tax. The 6% tax was put there as a safeguard because we knew we had to do something to save that amount of money. It was never something that people liked the idea of. Well, I'm here to say today we are working actively to get rid of it. So for now, it's suspended. We're not going to be taxing anyone. You have not been taxed yet. It was going to be done at the end of July. It has not happened. So no worries there. There'll be no need to reconcile anything because no one has been charged. So just wanted to get that out there. But the next line, that means that engagement is all the more important. So if we're not going to do something across the board that's kind of mechanical, that means that we're going to depend on everyone helping and working with us and thinking creatively about what kinds of expenses can be avoided, what kinds of expenses can be delayed. Are we getting the best price for everything we buy, or are we really being aggressive about trying to be good business people at the University of Louisville? And then the last line, this is a cultural change, okay? This is a big deal for the university to be thinking in these terms. And I've received a whole bunch of email from people, and some of them say, you know, who are the people responsible today for all this overspending? And there's no answer to that. It's not as though there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people here today responsible for this. As a university, we have been spending a lot of money, and we have been not working collectively to contain our expenses. And now we are, and I think it's going to work. And so this is something that I think is important, that this is a cultural change that we are participating in. Last slide, there are some new people, and then some people who are not new but are in new roles that I just wanted to make mention of. So those of you on the Health Sciences campus will get to know Dan Durbin, who started 3 weeks ago as our new CFO at the Health Sciences campus, replacing Daryl Griffith. Ralph Fitzpatrick, no stranger to any of you, is our interim vice president for community engagement. Brian Robinson here in the front is our interim vice president for advancement after the retirement of Keith Inman. John Elliott, I don't know if he's here today. John is the interim VP for human resources. And Mindy Eves was just hired from the Jefferson County Public School System. She will be the ombuds person, the first time we've had a full-time individual in that role, and she will be starting soon. So those are some names that you will hear. I just wanted to mention them. And with that, I'm going to stop. I went a little bit past what I thought I would do, but I've got plenty of time, and I can stay afterwards if some of you have to leave to try to make sure I address your questions. Yes?
Do I need to go to the mic?
If they can't hear you, I can repeat the question. We're streaming, so I might repeat the question so that people who are watching online can hear it as well.
So I'm Katrina from Health Promotion, and kind of speaking to your comment about us all thinking critically and strategically about spending the best price or getting the best price on things. One thing we've been running into, especially with office supplies, is having to use the university-approved vendor OfficeMax/Depot when things are like $100 cheaper on Amazon. And so that's running up our budget, and we keep on trying to get approved to order through Amazon or a different vendor. And since it's a special deal with OfficeMax, I'm sure things that are way out of what I'm supposed to understand, we've been hit with no, you can't order, and we've asked over and over again, and we keep getting a no on that. But it's costing our budget quite a lot to have to order through that when we can find these things cheaper on Amazon. And we can use Amazon, but only if it's not offered through OfficeMax. So the other day I had to order ink for our toner cartridges, or toner for our printer, and I had to spend $100 more just because it was not approved to use it. So just an idea to think about, or say, what can we do differently with that, because that is costing our budget quite a lot.
Lee, do you want to take a stab at answering that? So the question, if any of you couldn't hear her question, it was about the ability to purchase supplies less expensively, if that's an option, as opposed to through the university's collective purchasing mechanisms, and how that should be addressed.
Sure.
I think it's live.
Okay, good. That's a question that we have heard in recent weeks. And one of the challenges with these large contracts, like with OfficeMax and so forth, is when you're ordering individual items that hit your unit budgets, at times those items may be more expensive at OfficeMax than elsewhere. But in aggregate, when we look at the total spend across the university, the way those contracts are set up is so that our total office supply cost is less based on the volume that we spend with them. Now, that being said, we are very actively looking right now at the top commodities where our spend occurs. So we've identified the top 10 to 20 areas. Office supplies is there, catering, food, travel, elements like that. And the procurement operation is Mark Watkins in the room right here. So Mark is our Associate Vice President for Business Services. Procurement reports up through Mark, and they are very actively looking at each of our contracts to ensure that we can optimize that. On the Amazon end as well, some of you are aware of the Amazon Business Partnership, which allows you to get competitive pricing, free shipping, exempts sales tax as well, and we're going to be working to promote that in the near term as well. One of the things we've discovered recently is, for example, there are many Amazon Prime memberships that are paid for across campus. Well, we don't need to pay for Amazon Prime because we have Amazon Business. So how can we eliminate those Prime memberships and move expenses over to this Amazon Business? So we're working very actively on that. We have an operational savings advisory group that's made up of representatives from Staff Senate, Faculty Senate, student government, we have deans, we have chairs, we have lead fiscal officers, and we're working through a number of initiatives, and we'll be communicating those out as we're able to achieve better pricing in a number of areas.
Thank you, Lee. Yes, sir.
Is this on?
It is. Yes.
Okay. My name is Al Futrell. I'm from the Department of Communication. A couple of things I want to ask you. If I could just for a second, if I could respond to what Lee just said. The problem, a big part of the problem at the department level is the communication that's not getting to us. So we don't know about these Prime, for example, the Amazon Prime kind of stuff. And that is something you need to work on. I remember talking to Harlan about it when he was here, and he had the problem, and the problem persists, that a lot of the business ops we're not hearing about them. And so something needs to be done about that. But that's not really what the question I want to ask you. Actually, I have a whole list of questions. I won't ask them all. After you listen to your presentation, it'd be nice if it wasn't such a one-way communication here, that if we had a panel or something that could discuss some of these issues that you brought up, because I think there's a variety of different opinions of what you said, what has been accomplished, what hasn't been, and what the agenda should be. But I'm not going to address that. I'm just going to ask you on a couple of things you said. And the one that bothers me the most is you pointed out that everybody is sacrificing something on this budget issue. And my question to you is why? Everybody wasn't responsible for the problem. Why are we an A&S who didn't have anything to do with this problem? You say we're doing this collectively. I don't think that's a good way to do it, because there's no way to penalize, there's no reason to penalize arts and sciences when they didn't have anything to do with the problem. But more important, when you mentioned about redesigning distance education, I think one of the things that you and your advisors fail to understand is this: that distance education money does not work the way the other money works in the university. For example, if I hire a part-timer to teach a distance education course, and it costs me $3,000, that course is going to generate, in my department, on average, about $15,000. I take $3,000 and pay the person for teaching the class, I have $12,000 left. I can now teach 4 more face-to-face classes. So for that $3,000, I'm getting $15,000 worth of teaching. So when you cut our budget and you cut our distance education revenue, you're not cutting it by $3,000, you're cutting it by $15,000. That will not contribute to the goals that you have in mind, specifically the graduation rate. Because the graduation rate went up when we started doing things at the department level where the department chairs had money that they could use to deliver more courses. Because the bottom line is all the focus groups we've done over the years, long before you were interim president, showed that what the students needed was more classes. That's how you graduate, more classes. Students could not get to classes. Distance education is one way that we can provide the departments with more money so we can actually teach more classes. And the graduation rate can go up. But when you cut distance education money, you're cutting your nose off to spite your face. You're going to actually have a decrease in the graduation rate. And you're going to be penalizing a college that relies on distance education for its everyday operations. And by doing that, you're going to be penalizing the entire university, because that graduation rate will go down, because the graduation rate rises and falls with A&S. The medical school has nothing to do with the graduation rate. The law school has nothing to do with it. It's A&S. That's the main college in the university where that graduation rate is determined. And by cutting us, you're cutting the graduation rate. You're actually cutting us by much more than you think you are, budget-wise. So could you respond to that, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Al. So I appreciate your input, and you've sent some thoughtful emails to me in the last couple of weeks as well, and I think this is a good conversation. Let me try to touch base on 2 or 3 of the things that you ask about. First of all, in terms of the setting for this forum, I like the idea of a panel. So basically, I came here today because I'm trying to communicate. I'm trying to get things out in as many different ways as possible. To get to as many people on campus as humanly possible. Now, there are different ways to do that. And so at the beginning, I mentioned that we were trying to look for dates for something in September or October. Maybe we could do that as a panel conversation. I think that's a great idea. And that might be a way for 4 or 5 folks who have been working with us, thinking through these ideas, to all be here and participate in this dialogue and respond to these kinds of questions. Thank you for that idea. I think we'll do that. Now, just a couple things to touch on here. First of all, I hope people realize that the ideas that we put up on these slides today, if you notice the way they were phrased, the last slide in each section said what could be. It didn't say what should be. Okay, so those were not decisions that had been made. Those were ideas. And the purpose here today is for us to find out what it is that people are passionate about and what they think needs to be evaluated. So as distance education, I put it up there as a topic that we need to discuss. And I think I mentioned that I've been hearing that a lot of people are frustrated about the way distance education is handled, and you've amplified that. That's why I put it there. There have been no decisions about it other than that it's a hot topic and it's something we need to analyze. So for instance, right now, Dale Billingsley, our provost, is working with me, and so we've chosen 3 departments in A&S. Yours is one of them. So communications, Pan-African Studies, and philosophy are being evaluated, and we're doing a deep dive. And you're involved in this, Al, so you're aware of this. We're doing a deep dive, and we're involving our central finance group. We're involving the Dean of Arts and Sciences, the department chairs, the lead financial officers, and we're getting everybody together, and we're drilling down on the exact kinds of situations that you just described, those numbers, because they are confusing and they don't make sense, and we cannot be self-sustaining if the money is not going in a way to support the faculty who are actually teaching the classes. You and I are in complete agreement. And so that's why we've put together this initiative to do a deep dive and then see perhaps can that be extrapolated across arts and sciences, because it's a big place with all the departments there. So we picked 3 as a place to start, to try to understand if there are commonalities and things that can be learned from the way things are being handled. I don't think anyone is trying to say that the way it's working today makes sense. I'm throwing up here suggestions that I want to see if people latch onto for things we can study and things we can look at to do it better. In terms of the actual budget we're working with right now, we were faced in January with a deficiency of $48 million in our budget. That hole had to be filled, and we had very little time to do it. And so when you have very little time to fill a hole like that, you have to make some cuts. That is not a long-term solution. Again, the whole point of this discussion today was to tell everybody, look, we have to get past the frustration about short-term budgetary issues and consider what it is that we're going to do to move past that and generate the kind of income that will be necessary to support our program so we don't have to do this again. But that takes some time, it takes engagement, and you can't do it quickly. We did not have the option of taking money from our foundation again to fill a hole. They tried that year after year, and guess what? They ran out of money. Now all of a sudden Saks is interested in it and everybody's interested in it. We don't have any choice if we want to have an accredited school that is solvent, but to have a balanced budget. So there are a limited number of ways in a very short period of time you can do that. In the long run, which is what we are trying to start talking about today, you have a whole universe of options and things that can be done so that you don't ever find yourself in a situation like this again. So I don't know if that touches on most of the things you ask about. I tried to get to them.
I still don't understand why you feel like it has to be a collective effort, like everybody has to be penalized because of the misdeeds of a few. That part of it I don't understand.
Well, we're a community, and we're all trying to do things.
So. Community, though, we don't share in the bounty that the medical school gets. We only have to pay when they make a mistake, and that's what bothers us, or the athletic program.
Well, every area on campus is making cuts, and again, we'd be happy to show you.
Why?
Because we have a budget shortfall.
Sciences or with business education. That's the only money we have, and when you cut, like I just pointed out, when you cut $3,000, you cut $15,000. That doesn't make any sense. You're working against yourself. You're making a bigger cut than you think you're making.
Well, other than trying to...
Nobody understands at the level, at the central administration level, nobody understands how that works. Somebody needs to come and explain to you guys, this is how distance education works. This is how the money flows. It's not like the other money when you say, if I go out and buy a computer, I spend $1,000 and that's $1,000 I spend and it's gone. When I spend $1,000 on a distance ed course, I'm going to generate more income that I'll have to spend on something else.
Well, Al, this is why you have been asked to engage with us in this deep dive to redesign this. In your email, you said you were happy to participate. And we need your ideas, and other than saying we're going to study it and redesign it, I'm not quite sure what I can tell you today.
But that was the question. The question I'm still, not just me, but sort of my colleague was wondering, why does everybody have to share in this grief?
Because we have a short-term emergency that we have to fix in order to preserve the university. I don't know how else to answer it. There are a couple questions over here.
Hi, Terry Holtz, University Libraries. You're presenting two things to us today, like what to look for in the future and what we've been dealing with. And I think my biggest question is, how do we even move to that future when we're all feeling the pain of the constant budget cuts that we faced over the years, loss of positions that may not have been strategic because they're just kind of like sweeping any empty position that goes. So how do we go from this kind of this negative position to being able to do all these great things that we want to do in the future?
Well, it's not easy. It's a multitasking exercise, right? So, I mean, one thing that people at universities do well is they balance priorities, okay? We all have more than one thing in our life that we need to focus on, and we can't say that one's important and the other one isn't. So that's why my first slide today sort of showed those overlapping circles. You know, we've got real issues that we're working through today. They're not going to go away overnight, but if we don't also start placing some emphasis and using some of our time to think about where we're headed, we may never get away from where we are. We may find ourselves here next year having this same conversation, which would be a real problem. We cannot find ourselves in that situation again. We've got to start shifting gears. And so I'm doing this in my professional life currently. I'm spending part of my time obviously focused on the here and now and the complete resolution of all the things we're facing. But I'm also starting to place emphasis on planning and looking at future state and trying to get input from across campus about what it is that people want, what they're frustrated about. We've heard some good examples of that today, some of the things we need to study so that we can know what to do differently. You know, we're not going to get out of this by dwelling on it. We have to fix the things, but then we also have to do it better, or we're just asking to repeat the failure.
So I'd like to add to Al's comments. Specifically, Al's interested in distance education, but there are other ways that that the college gets money, specifically teaching assistantships in biology, for example, generate way more income for the university than the cost of the teaching assistantship. And my suspicion is that some of the cuts that either have been made or considering are reducing teaching assistantships at graduate level. Again, it's one of those things that seems like a cost savings, but actually in the short and long term is really a mistake. And I guess what I would like to say is that I don't think there's anyone that would argue that the primary source of our problems have been at the administrative level, higher administration, the worst in terms of these problems. So why shouldn't they be the ones that get taxed? How about a 6% tax on every administrator, especially when they do something that reduces efficiency at the university, that makes it harder for faculty to do their jobs, that makes it harder for staff in each of the offices, for example, in the college, to do their job, that come up with things that basically make it harder for us to do our job with the idea that it's going to be a cost savings or it's going to be more efficient from some sort of business model. I mean, this is a university. We're supposed to be a team, yet every department has to pay IT for having an Ethernet line installed or having a phone installed. Why don't you just have a budget to fund IT so that the university can do their job? Same kind of thing with buildings and things that go wrong with the plumbing or the electricity or whatever. Departments get charged for a lot of that stuff. Why? Why not just fund these departments the way they should be? And I use that as a rhetorical statement about taxing administrators because I don't think it's ever going to happen. But let's put the blame where the blame belongs and make those most responsible take the deepest cuts rather than increase the number of administrators. You just showed us 5 or 6 new administrators that have been appointed. Those people get way more money than faculty and staff and custodial people. You know, let's make those cuts there instead of at the point of people that are working hard and not making a whole lot of money. And I'm not saying we need more money. I'm just saying that the people at the top need to make less money. There's a place to save money. Okay.
So you would be pleased if you actually saw the salaries of the folks we're hiring. First of all, when we say hiring, they're not all new people. So 3 of the 5 names that I showed you today were existing U of L employees who simply moved across to fill a position of someone who had retired or who had left, so that they weren't hires. And all of those people were brought in at salaries dramatically lower than their predecessors were making. So I can't tell you the exact numbers because that's obviously a violation of private information. You can find out if you want, I guess, through open records type requests. But these are all lower salaries than the predecessors. So we're taking your advice. That's already being done. And again, most of those people were not hires. The ombuds position was a hire, but there was a faculty search and a process where basically we were told that that was a position we needed. An ombuds position is a person who helps resolve conflict and solve problems and work with faculty disputes and those kinds of things. We had a person doing that part-time, but it had surpassed in a big sort of way the ability of a person to do that part-time. And so that was a need that was brought to our attention. That was not something that we thought of ourselves. That was a collective comment that a lot of people felt that was good for the university community to have a problem-solving mechanism in place. And it's just one person for a large university. So I think that there has been a lot of thought given to this. If you look at the office of the president, I've got 4 people now in my office. And before, a year ago or 2 years ago, it was over 20. So come by the offices in Grawemeyer someday, anytime. Come visit, and I'll take you through, and you will see empty offices everywhere. Okay? There are all kinds of empty offices in Grawemeyer Hall. So I'm saying I agree with you, and please come and see for yourself if you don't believe me, because we are trying to contain costs, and no one is spared. The comment that I made today is correct. We've been trying to cut expenses in every area at the university. Yes?
I'm Dawn Heineken, Women's and Gender Studies. I'm really, really happy to hear you talk about not wanting to follow a top-down model anymore. That's really lovely to hear. My comment kind of, I think, piggybacks a little bit on some of the things that Al was saying, though, in terms of how priorities are set, right? Because ideally, if things are not top-down, priorities need to come from below. In the past, though, we haven't had a good mechanism for that. And I don't necessarily see anything yet in place on a structural level that's really going to enable voices from the bottom up. You know, this forum is a start. I know you plan to hold forums in the future, but how are you envisioning a structure that really allows faculty in particular to consistently participate in determining priorities?
Okay, well that's a great question, and I think part of the answer is we have mechanisms already and we're trying to find more. Okay, so if we think about it, we have a faculty senate, which according to the Red Book is the official body that represents the interests of faculty to the administration. So that's one way. We have a staff senate, which does the same thing for the staff. But those are far from the only ways that this works. So the deans themselves are supposed to be a conduit of information from the faculty to the department chairs to the deans to the provosts. So that's one mechanism, obviously a formal mechanism that's in place just through the organizational chart. But then we have all kinds of other organizations on campus that serve important advocacy roles. We have an AAUP chapter on campus that is another way of us obtaining input about things. We have commissions like CASAWA and CODRA. We have a budget advisory committee now that is in place and is working with Susan and the budget team to make sure that faculty and staff are included and lead financial officers in brainstorming what to do about the budget. We have groups that look at tuition and fees, right? So those are large groups that make recommendations about what to do about tuition and fees for our students. Lee Smith mentioned there's a group now that's looking at operations and procurement and costs, faculty, staff, students participating in those initiatives. And I guess what I'm here today is to say that those don't have to be the only ones. I mean, I am open to, all sorts of ways to make sure that the concerns of faculty and staff and students get to me. There's the Student Government Association. I can't believe I forgot to mention that one. So, I mean, there are lots and lots of groups. Then in addition, we try to hold forums like this. I meet with the deans. I meet with anybody who wants to meet with me. I get a crazy amount of email. You should see how many people reach out individually. We're looking for ways to get input, and it's not a limited list. The sky's the limit.
Well, so everything that you've said has existed for the last 20 years, and the communication has been really, really poor. So I'm concerned, again, going forward in the future, how do we really energize that? Our faculty senate, I've been a faculty senator, and I don't mean to slam anybody on senate, but it has not been effective in doing this kind of communication that you've been talking about. I feel like what happens, you get maybe one faculty member, the chair of the Senate, that gets a voice on the board that maybe gets listened to, but you don't have the consistent participation of all the faculty. Maybe there's, we have a pretty active faculty assembly in arts and sciences, but I'm not sure how much of that information ever goes up. And I don't know that assemblies are as active in other colleges. So I'm just saying that I really think that that's a weakness that we need to really, really think about creating better structures.
So I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, can you imagine? Okay, so think of the frustration. We spend an incredible amount of time meeting with the whole list of organizations that I just mentioned and others. That wasn't even a complete list. And I understand that many of those have been around for a while. So literally hundreds of hours of faculty and staff and student time is spent in those kinds of meetings in an effort to try to get everybody involved. And what you're saying, and I believe you because I hear this all the time, that somehow or other a lot of the information is not percolating across campus and everybody is not hearing this. That's one of the reasons I'm doing the kind of thing I'm doing today, because I hear that and I know that the word is not getting out consistently. That's why I made a YouTube video that we put online Sunday night. I know 575 people have already watched it, and I hope 5,000 people watch it, because I'm trying to find ways to get everybody involved in the conversation. So we need to drill down and figure out why it is that some of these forums that exist are not getting the word out. Something's wrong. We've got to figure it out, because it's not for lack of effort. There's a tremendous amount of time being spent trying to do that. And so if it's not working and the information is getting blocked somewhere along that communication chain, we've got to figure out why and fix it. And I'm very eager to do that, because I don't want to spend time going and talking to groups and then having that information not get out. I mean, it's a waste of everybody's time. Are there other questions? Yes, here we go.
It's just one thing. It's a rumor that I've heard that the Humana Gym is now going to have to pay in order to use the Humana Gym.
Well, we're studying that, okay? So the Humana Gym, this is a dilemma. Okay, the question was the Humana Gym and whether there was going to be an increase in the cost to use the Humana Gym. Sorry? The Get Healthy Now gym, that's right, yeah, over on the southeast end of Belknap campus. So that's a dilemma that we have to figure out, and there's a dialogue right now going on with Faculty Senate and Staff Senate about it. So that building was renovated, and the foundation loaned money to renovate that building. And obviously the foundation needs to get paid back. And then the building itself and the staff and the facilities are expensive to run. And we've tried to keep the costs down, and so the membership fee that is charged there is very, very low compared to any other kind of gym in town as a benefit to the faculty and to the staff. As a result, we're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and still not paying the foundation back. So it's a budgetary issue, it's a foundation issue, and a mile away we have a huge rec center that has capacity, and we're having to pay that building down too because the university took bonds out and we're having to pay off that building, millions of dollars that we still owe on that facility. So we've got two gyms a mile apart that we're trying to fund, and they're both losing money. These are the kinds of things that I had dropped in my lap. There's no good answer. I mean, on one hand, we could say, don't do anything and we're just going to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars and it's going to come out of someplace else, which isn't fair. On the other hand, we can charge more for the gym memberships and the members are going to be mad. You see, I mean, these are the kinds of things that have, every problem is like this. You know, there are two sides to the argument and it's impossible to satisfy all the issues. So they're still thinking, I guess, is the answer to your question. It's not a rumor, it's true that we're thinking about ways to do this. There's been discussion about just closing the gym and having the members use the rec center, which would be the most cost efficient of all. That's a possibility. Some of the gym members say, no, we want the gym, but we don't want to pay to go there, right? So.
We staff did not get a raise this year, yet our parking went up, and yet there are aspects of the university community that pay no parking, yet ours goes up.
So who are you thinking of specifically who doesn't pay for parking? I do. I buy a parking tag. Who are you thinking about?
I'm just thinking more along the lines of central administration.
Well, then, if you know people that aren't paying to park, please let me know who they are, because we charge students, we charge staff, we charge faculty. Like I said, I get a bill every year. They take it out of my paycheck monthly to pay for my parking tag. It's not free. And so if I'm paying to park, I don't know, I think everybody should. Okay, but you might be right. I mean, there's thousands of people here. If you know some folks who aren't paying to park, we'll figure it out and we'll charge them. Right? Pardon?
Departments pay sometimes for some of their other people.
Yeah. I am not advocating for anybody getting a pass, okay? And if anybody's hearing that today, you're not hearing what I'm trying to say, or I'm not communicating it well enough, because we are all trying to contribute to make this place sustainable so we don't have these problems again. I'll take one more question. Gail?
So I really appreciate the job you did of letting us know where we've been and where you'd like to see us go. And I think one of the problems that emerges when there is no information, people create their own. So I think the devil's in the details. You have a great vision for us moving forward. So I'd really like to hear a little bit about your time frame, how you plan to go about moving forward. You talked about what could be. There are lots of elements there that I think could change the culture of the institution and our trajectory forward. Mm-hmm. So when you think about moving forward, what does that look like?
Well, that's a great final question. So I mentioned at the beginning that the plan here is to have another one of these types of forums real soon. We're looking at dates in late September, early October. And I really like the idea today that Al suggested about maybe it could be a panel. I think that's a really creative idea. But the idea here is what we would do is then the next step in this process is to understand what kind of mechanism we can put in place for faculty to provide input as to how we should approach each of these areas that are component parts of our strategic vision. And this sort of cuts across questions today in terms of, the information not getting out to anyone. We need not only for the information to get out, we need for the information to get in. Okay, so I think the next forum is going to be really a preparatory session for people to engage and help us understand what kind of structure it's going to take to do this properly and make sure that the feedback that we get is complete and uniform and coming from all parts of the university. We don't want good ideas to not be heard. And we want to make sure that changes or contemplated changes are communicated. So that really seems to me to be a very good idea for a focus of the next session. We can't lose momentum if we're going to do this. This today was not intended in any way to be a pep rally. This was intended to be a start of a conversation about our campus community and what's working and what's not working, and that's why I tried to show it as sort of a balanced approach. Yeah, we've done these things we haven't done, what could we do, right? I mean, this is a dialogue, not a lecture, and I know it seemed like a lecture, but we need to now figure out how to turn it into a dialogue so that people can participate in a meaningful way. So that's what's next, Gail, and we'll be giving you information as we find out what good dates would be. We'll figure out good locations, good times, and we need your involvement. And I hope that you are hearing that we are listening. And this 6% tax is an example. We are trying to respond to feedback. And I mean that very seriously. So we'll do this again. And I really sincerely appreciate your passion and your interest in being here today. Thank you.